Virgins. My name's Mariah, and today I'm going to be talking about James 2:14 through 26, which lays out the relationship between faith and works. And James does this by giving us some logic and also some examples that we can follow to really understand what he's trying to get across to us in this passage. I would say how he defines faith, just by the context and the verbiage that he uses, is belief that is evidenced by our actions. And when he talks about works, it looks a little different from how Paul talks about works, which seems to be more about adherence to the law. But he rather gives us 3 examples of what works look like that show the evidence of our faith. The first example is giving clothes and food to those who are in need. So this is an example of really pouring into and caring for marginalized and disenfranchised populations. And the second example he gives is Abraham, when he offers Isaac up as a sacrifice to God. We know this to be an example of trusting in God through our actions. And the third example he gives is the example of Rahab, when she hid the spies who were scoping out Jericho. We can see this maybe as an example of hospitality, or even more than that, taking a risk for others, since what she did was a pretty dangerous endeavor. And he breaks down this chapter into 3 different statements as well, I would say, about faith and works. The first statement is that faith without deeds is no good or useless. He says this in verse 14 when he says, "What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds?" And then also in verse 20, where he says, "You foolish man, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless?" And he explains this with this example and this image of this person who has no clothes, no food, and who is coming to someone asking for help. And if he says, like in verse 15, "Go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? So that's kind of like this equivalent of saying, I give you my thoughts and prayers, but without any actions following that to meet the tangible needs of someone. And then the second statement he makes about faith and works is that faith without works doesn't save. This is important to understand because he's not saying at all that our works save us. He says, I will show you my faith by my works, not I will show you my works instead of my faith. And it seems like what he's getting at here is that our faith without works is not authentic. And this really reminds me of John chapter 15. Where it talks about bearing fruit and how that shows us and it shows God the evidence of our faith. It says, "I am the true vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful." And an important point in John 15 in looking at this is also further on where it says, "No branch can bear fruit by itself, but it must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me," which is an important reminder that our works are only really truly authentic and truly Christ-like when we're rooted and established and abiding in Christ. And yeah, so just to sum this point up, it seems like what he's saying is that that this kind of faith isn't going to save us if it's not backed up by our actions, because then it's inauthentic. And then the third statement he makes is that faith without deeds is dead, which is a pretty striking image. What I picture is we would look like a corpse before God if we are presenting ourselves to him, saying that we have faith, but have no actions to back it up. And so when it comes to practical steps from this passage, I think there are a few questions that maybe we can ask ourselves today. The first question is, are there any areas in my life where my actions are not aligned with my words? Are there any areas where I can be serving and caring for marginalized, vulnerable populations, which is very fitting when it comes to current events right now? How can I be showing my faith through my actions in this present day context? Also, are there any opportunities where I need to act on my trust in God like Abraham did, or take a risk for others like Rahab did? And my prayer for us today is that we start looking into ourselves and taking some time for introspection so that we can allow ourselves to be pruned by God so that we can bear even more fruit and to really show our faith in a tangible way through our actions. Have a good day.